Hey guys, welcome to episode 6 of Maniacs. And this episode is entitled My Why. And like it's happened before, I really wasn't planning on this episode being this. I was actually planning on it being on something else. But again, I constantly try to, stay in prayer and make sure that I'm really being led by the Holy Spirit when I do these episodes, and also staying in prayer, and appreciate your prayer too for me, that I keep the right spirit about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I've had several people, well, more than several, but especially over the last couple weeks, I've had 3 people specifically ask me why I'm doing this and what I plan to get out of it and that sort of thing. And so, this episode is really more about that rather than talking specifically about my experiences at World Harvest Church as the HR director. So, in the episode today, I'm just going to be talking, about why I am doing this and why I feel like it's so important, and why I feel like God led me to do this. And I think a lot of it goes back to even, my young childhood. So I think that God allows us to go through things to prepare us for other things, to help people, to ultimately, show God's goodness even in bad situations. And when I started really thinking about, everything that I experienced, and I know a lot of you experienced at World Harvest, it was, it kind of led me to think about my own life and how, things seemed to be orchestrated perfectly once I got later in life to understand, why did God let me go through those things? What was the ultimate goal? And I'm sure, that's questions that we all kind of toil with throughout our lives, especially when things are going on that, we don't understand and we don't like. So, throughout my life, my earliest childhood memories are unfortunately of abuse. And the abuse, went on throughout most of my life. Several, different people involved, but always trusted people, always people that I looked up to, typically men, but, it came in all forms, unfortunately. And, I remember wondering why no one was protecting me, or God wasn't protecting me. And it was very hard to understand as a child, but even as an adult, why does God allow these things to happen, and why are people led to behave a certain way or hurt people and demean people and make them feel less than. And, the very popular saying of, hurt people, I believe is very true. But I also believe that healed people help heal people. And like I've said before, that's what this podcast is for ultimately. It's not to humiliate people. It's not to be mean and nasty. It is, exposing, but I feel like in the most gracious way possible. It's talking about real life experiences. It's talking about truths that I experienced, and I know a lot of you have experienced as well. And it is bringing those things to light. But it's more about, validation of the people over decades that have lived these experiences. And now they have to hear that, things that happened to them 20 years ago or 25 years ago are still going on today. And I know a lot of people are just very angered and outraged by that, by the messages that I've received. And I believe that a lot of that, is righteous anger, if you will, because it's hard to fathom why and how things go on as long as they have been. But sometimes, that's not really for us to decide, but I think it is our duty to say the truth. It is our duty to help other people if we have the means to do so. And so again, just talking a little bit about that. So even, going back, which is very weird to, even talk about myself, because that's not, I'm talking about my experiences, but not necessarily about myself. But in talking about, a young life and life in general, being filled with a lot of abuse, a lot of mean-spirited and negative behavior from the people that should be protecting you. A lot of being put in bad situations and trying to have to figure your way out of those. Those developed, a lot of what I would call survival skills in me. But it also caused me to have a lot of symptoms that I was trying to treat rather than treating the actual problems, because I just didn't know how deep those went. And to be completely honest, it was so painful, even scratching the surface, that it made it really hard to accept that I was going to have to, rip off some Band-Aids and rip some scabs off. So, early life and young life for me was not great, and found myself, with 2 suicide attempts by the time I was 13. Drug addiction, alcohol addiction, dropping out of high school in 11th grade, and just really leading a very unproductive life. And from the outside looking in, it looked like I had, my stuff together if you didn't really know me that well, because I was always taught, to, no matter what's going on behind closed doors, to always, pretend like everything's okay outside. And that was kind of instilled in me. And so that's what I did. And found myself, in and out of jail in my early 20s and late teens. And really had just a heart full of unforgiveness and rage and hatefulness. And I know, unfortunately, and manipulation, really. I mean, when you've been manipulated, especially when you're young, you kind of pick up those traits. And so I, I found myself really treating people the way that I did not want to be treated. I hated the way that I had been treated. But I really just had, a nasty heart, unfortunately. But the good news is that that God came back, and I allowed him to come back, and I allowed him to work on my heart and replace the unforgiveness with forgiveness, and to replace the hatefulness and the rage with love and understanding. And I believe that making that choice was really what, brought me into creating the person that I am today. And I was able to, find a Christian counselor and really just, start cultivating my relationship with God again. But going to counseling and allowing, the Band-Aids to be ripped off and the scabs to be ripped off, and to really start working on me and treating the core issues rather than treating the symptoms, which, were all of those other things that I mentioned. And, was able to get my GED at 27 and start college and get 2 college degrees and be in a position where I was really living out what God had created me to be. And was able, to really help people, and not just from a professional stance, but I think that, being able to understand people and being able to be compassionate, and not always that I had to, give a testimony or anything like that, but just being able to be in a position where I was understanding of where people were, not only in their life, but maybe just in their journey altogether. And I think that, it put me in a place where when I then was in a position, in human resources, which was something that my career really didn't start off being, but it ended up being in that place. I think that, that was perfectly orchestrated and designed by God to not only give me the knowledge and the experience for human resources, but then to put me in that position at World Harvest Church, where there were so many people that needed, an advocate, and not somebody that was strictly just carrying out orders or was a part of the executive leadership, and, where I wouldn't keep things confidential and I was running and telling them everything. And I think that it gave a lot of people some hope and a feeling of, okay, we can do this, we can make it through this, and not really understanding why certain things were happening or why they were in that position, but that there, was kind of a glimmer of hope, which I think that we all need, especially when we are in very, very bad positions, not only maybe physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually and financially. We're grasping at straws to try to find some hope that things are going to get better, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And in being in that position and experiencing the things that I experienced and experiencing what others were experiencing, it really, reminded me so much of some of the positions I had been in earlier in my life, and also dealing with the same personality and personality traits that I had dealt with. And, narcissistic behavior is very hard to deal with, because they use your weaknesses against you. They use what you know to be truth against you. They are never wrong. You are always wrong. They are the victim and you are the perpetrator, rather than the other way around. And that can be, very hard to not only understand, but place it, because, again, these are people that you look up to. These are people that you feel like you have either been able to or can be vulnerable with. And then for it to be thrown up in your face or used against you, and then to just continually be berated and verbally and emotionally, and at times physically abused, and the spiritual abuse that goes into that, it has, not only left a trail of tears from that place, but I'm sure that, unfortunately, it happens at other churches as well. And I don't know if, we as the people that are kind of, supporting the church, we are valuing certain things and not those that matter. So we're valuing or putting placements of success on these people by maybe the number of books that they sell, and how many people are sitting in their pews, and how many social media followers that they have. But we're not really looking at the fruit, and we're not listening to the people that tell us what their experience has been, and what the experiences have been over, decades. And I know that I mentioned, in one of my first videos about, not liking bullies. But I can also sit here and tell you that the people that I'm discussing, the people that have hurt you, the people that have hurt me, the people that I have seen hurt others, I've actually, been in their shoes too. And so I feel like my perspective is really, completely 360, because I know what it's like to be in these positions. I know what it's like for the heart to feel dark and angry and nasty and mean. And all you want to do is, whether it's inadvertent or advertent, make other people feel the same way that you're feeling, because, misery loves company, and there is some power that you feel when you can make someone else feel an emotion. And certainly not proud of those things, but I also, I think it's important to say, I've been there, I understand that. But I also know that there is hope beyond that God can do all things, that He can change us, that He can change our hearts, and He can help you forgive people that are not sorry. He can help you forgive people that you will never get an apology from. But He can be everything that human beings cannot be. We a lot of times place these expectations on humans, and they're really only meant for God, because he's sovereign, he's perfect. He's not going to hurt us. People will hurt us even if they don't mean to hurt us, because we're human beings. But I also believe, in saying all of that, and having an understanding and a compassion for all people and where they are in their journeys, that it's also, our duty to stand up for what is right, and that we cannot be fearful and so bound by our own fear and anger a lot of times by what's happened to us, and sadness, and all of those emotions, when you've been wronged and you've been mistreated, especially in the name of God. But, I found myself even mad at God for, not protecting me. And I don't know if any of you feel that way or have felt that way. But it's a very uncomfortable and just terrible place to be, when the one person or God that you should be able to count on, you feel like you can't. And those are issues and things that, we have to work through, but we have to allow him to work his magic, if you will, in our lives and in our hearts, because that's not going to get us anywhere. It's not going to help us heal. But healing, it doesn't mean that you forget, but it does mean that you forgive. And healing also does not mean that you can't talk about your situation or talk about the things that have ultimately formed some of who you are and formed some of your personality, because that's what our experiences do. But we have to, remember to keep it in the right spirit. And I know, there's plenty of people, believe me, I get messages and see comments all the time that, people think that I'm wrong for having this podcast, for having these conversations. And that's okay. My podcast is probably not for you then, because it is not, I feel like I have to, say it again. It is not ultimately to humiliate people, but it's to be honest, and it's to give a voice to the people that have been silenced. And it's to give some validation to the people that have gone through terrible experiences there. And the people that continue to be there and have some of these things continue to happen to them, and wondering why no one has been able to speak out or stand up against the wrongs. And in fact, there are several Bible verses that talk about this. And, Proverbs 31, 8-9 says, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy." And the Bible also tells us in Ephesians to take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. And maybe that's why I felt like I was led to, do an episode, not so much on, with the focus being on World Harvest and their leaders and how they mistreat people. But us as the people that are left in the wake of the mistreatment, and how do we unpack those things, and how do we allow God to work on our hearts and work on us as people and to move forward. And, for the people that think that I'm just as wrong for, speaking out as they are for their treatment, I will say that not only do I disagree, but I absolutely know that that is not the truth. And I believe that God can use all of us for his glory, even if we don't think that we have the power to do that, or that we have anything good to say. That we have to allow him to use us in the way that he sees fit, and be open to that, and be obedient to that, and to not continually question, which, I was guilty for doing that too. I didn't want to be the person that is sitting in front of you. For several reasons, but I've been in a really good place in my life, and didn't really want to rip off any Band-Aids, if you will. But here we are, and I know that there are a lot more people that are being helped by this podcast than are offended by it. And again, I appreciate all of you that have reached out to me, that send me your messages, that send me your stories, and that just want to talk to somebody that, not only can listen, but really understands some of the experiences that you've gone through, even if it was when I wasn't there. So, I, again, just want to thank all of you for listening and liking, subscribing, but also just for being you. We can be so hard on ourselves and feel like we're not doing the right thing, or question our motives, or question, why we feel like this internal struggle of, a sense of obligation, to do what we feel is right, or do what we feel like God's leading us to do. And then the other part of us, the very, human part of being scared, or just really, finding ourselves in a pretty good place, and we just don't want to rip off those Band-Aids and experience some of the pain that we tried to forget. And I'm here to tell you that it can be very painful, when you are in the midst of dealing with those things. But there is so much happiness and light on the other side. And that's regardless of what your situations have been. It doesn't necessarily have to be, affiliated to what this podcast is talking about, but that forgiveness and allowing God to work on our hearts in that way, that's for us. That's not for the person that hurt us. And we owe it, to ourselves, to have peace and to be able to help people if we can help them. And I hope that's what this podcast does. So, thanks again for listening, and have a good evening, and tune in next week.